SCOTUS's crazy decision on birthright citizenship. Stephen Miller gets attacked. The felon's secret health conditions finally revealed. Let's look into all that. Welcome to Scrying Out Loud. My name is Trevor. First off, a huge thank you to everybody who's subscribed to the channel. Thank you for liking, watching, commenting on the videos, sharing the videos, promoting the channel. It's all greatly, greatly appreciated. If you've donated money to the channel through the Super Thanks, Buy Me a Coffee, or Venmo, a huge, huge appreciation for that. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. Um, I am going to be offering a class on how I read tarot cards through my Patreon page. That'll be linked in the description. It'll be $29.99 a month. It'll take about 4 months, I think, to complete the class. It'll be some taped videos and then once a month a live interaction. So check that out. There's a synopsis of all the topics that'll be covered, as well as some more details on the Patreon site. Okay, so let's look into first this crazy ruling from the Supreme Court on birthright citizenship. Although, really, the ruling wasn't on birthright citizenship. What they basically said was uh, district courts and federal appellate courts don't really have the power to enforce injunctions nationwide. So, in other words, they can't stop a law nationwide, they can only stop it over the jurisdiction in which they reside, unless there's a class action lawsuit. So, the ruling in no way addressed birthright citizenship at all. That question's still up in the air. So there's 30 days before the injunction is removed nationwide. So there's a couple different options for how this can be approached. One, the defendants or the people suing to end birthright citizenship can ask to be considered a class so that it could be a class action lawsuit, and then the judge could issue a nationwide injunction. That's my understanding. The second option would be that we go to every appellate district in the country and get an injunction, and that would get a nationwide um, injunction on it. And this not only applies to the birthright citizenship executive order, it applies to all executive orders. So the question is, are we ready as liberal thinking Americans and the organizations we support? Are we ready for all these legal fights that have to take place now all over the country and not just in specific states? So let's first ask the question, will the case of birthright citizenship, will it be considered as a class action suit? And then we'll ask about the merit of the case as well. So we get the Ace of Pentacles flying out. I think it will. I think a couple things are going to happen. I think several of the places where the injunctions have been put out are going to consider the Supreme Court ruling kind of an affront, and therefore they're going to be more likely to consider it a class action lawsuit. And secondly, um, there's some other ways that this could go back to the Supreme Court, um, which I don't. This is why I don't understand the Supreme Court's ruling. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but you know, I do read a lot, and it feels like this, like if there's an injunction on, say, the states in New England, so the government can't do anything about birthright citizenship there, but they can try to prohibit birthright citizenship in, say, the southern part of the country. It feels like that violates equal protections, but the Supreme Court's decision is very bizarre. Will it, well, the question we're going to ask is, will one of these cases on the lower courts, will they consider this a class action lawsuit and let them form a class? I think they will. Let's see what the cards have to say. And then we'll look at the merits of the case, which is a totally different question. Yeah, I think they're going to let it move forward. We get the Six of Swords moving out of the troubled waters. And yeah, we get messages coming forward around the damage that it will cause to a group of like situated individuals, which is what is necessary for it to be declared a class, or at least that's my understanding. And we get circles of support and celebrations. I think the Supreme Court's decision was uh, ill-guided. The liberal dissents were quite passionate. I think they're worth a read if you feel like reading them. Um, and it's kind of like in no way is this going to affect the birthright citizenship case, because I think there's going to be a nationwide injunction before the 30 days expire, would be my guess. At the center of the reading, we get abuse of power. The idea of the Supreme Court's ruling is that these district court judges and these appellate courts are overstepping their boundaries by imposing the injunction on districts outside. That's the abuse of power they see. I think personally the Supreme Court's overstepping its authority by limiting, judicial power. They've kind of basically made themselves more powerful and the appellate system a little bit less powerful. Um, I think it's a terrible decision. I think the goal is to, um, you know, prevent executive orders being struck down right away nationwide. That's what their thinking was. But I think it's going to backfire in several ways, and we'll talk about that. But this sure looks like we get the star card of protection. It sure looks like the lower courts are going to let the people fighting against birthright citizenship or ending birthright citizenship, they're going to let them form a class, which would allow a class action lawsuit, which then would allow a nationwide ban because there'd be people in the class all over the country, which would do it. We do get the card for the Democrats as well. I think there'll be some advising on this from Democratic leaning organizations like the ACLU. And I think the judges below the Supreme Court are going to send a pretty fiery message back to the Supreme Court on how ill-guided this is and almost how untenable they've made um, keeping due process and equal protections available for everyone. So I do think it moves forward as a class action lawsuit. I think addresses the abuse of power, and I think the judges underneath the Supreme Court, the lower courts, will send quite a message to the Supreme Court. There's a lot of protection on the side here against the abuse of power, and it ends in circles of support and celebrations. This feels like the class itself. The circle of support are the people coming together to form the class. So, and then in the environment around, we get messages coming forward. We get this attempt to tear down structures. We have the card for the Democrats, and then we have this illusionary and delusionary thinking from, the six people on the Supreme Court, and maybe not all six of them that ruled for this are that delusional, but you never know. There might be trade-offs for other things in the future, but I don't think this in any way is going to prohibit this issue of birthright citizenship. Other issues it's going to be a problem for. We get the death card. This is, the end of a cycle and the beginning of something new. It just means we have to fight harder. And we get, some prosecutorial type energy from the Queen of Wands. So I think people were ready for this. If you had listened to the oral arguments on this case, it really isn't that much of a surprise ruling, although it's a terrible ruling, but not surprising. So, okay, so will, on the merits of the case, will birthright citizenship be upheld? So it's pretty explicitly written in the Constitution. Um, it brings into question a lot of things if you get rid of it. How do hospitals start handing out birth certificates? Do they have to be asking for proof of citizenship now when we go to the hospitals to have children? It just seems really messy and kind of unfeasible to enforce. So, will ultimately birthright citizenship be upheld as a right? Ultimately, birthright citizenship. So I see the star card in the water, which is about protection. I also see the Ten of Cups, which is about families, reunions, and celebrations, which makes me think that it will. And on the merits, it just really seems that they're going to have to bend themselves over backwards to try to explain how it's not protected when it's like literally written into the Constitution. So we get the Three of Swords, which it feels like sabotage. Like it's the executive branch's attempt to sabotage the Constitution, like in a very blatant way, not in a subtle way, but in a blatant way. It's kind of like if a Democratic president were to sign an executive order outlawing, you know, all guns, that would be blatantly against the Constitution, right? This is what it feels like. It's like they're trying to sabotage the Constitution. It doesn't feel like there's much of appetite for it with the Four of Cups, and it seems very ill-guided with the Four of Swords. We get bombshells and surprises as well. And at the center of the reading, we get this illusionary and delusionary thinking, which is basically the administration thinking that somehow they can go against the text of the Constitution. And we have a prosecutorial type energy in the environment around, and there's strength as well. And I think people will be walking away from this executive order. The courts are eventually going to side and say no, there is a constitutional right to birthright citizenship, and that kind of puts an end to the toxicity. So the attack on the Constitution is very misguided, and it's going to be seen for what it is. It's just a distraction, right? And the strength of the argument against the delusion will make it seem how ill thought out these executive orders are, trying to literally change the text of the Constitution. I don't think any of the justices will have an appetite for it. There might be one or two with Clarence Thomas and Alito, but I think the other seven will probably um, surprise some people and actually rule to uphold birthright citizenship and against the felon. Um, and I think the case actually made in front of the courts will be quite passionate and be really well thought out and contain a lot of historical facts, along with the fact that ending the birthright citizenship is just actually untenable. Like there's just no way to do it. So in the meantime, we're going to be in this hanged man energy for 3-4 weeks, and then I think it gets declared as a class and it's put on hold, and then it goes back to through the courts, and probably sometime in 2026, we get a ruling from the Supreme Court that says no, there's a right to birthright citizenship. That would be the way I see it unfolding. Okay, so when I was scrying, I keep getting images of like headlines that pertain to the felon's health. I keep getting shown these things over and over again. It feels like it's going to get exposed, like everything that he's going through that we don't know about. It feels like this involves probably, you know, something to do with either blood transfusions or being on blood thinners. It has to do with cognitive decline, probably something wrong with his heart as well. But also this morning when I was scrying, I kept seeing images of Stephen Miller and then like a voodoo doll and like several different hands sticking needles into this doll. And the last time I had images of something like this, it was several years ago, and it turned out that this was like a precursor to kind of an attack. So, is there going to be an attack on Stephen Miller? I want to look at that, and then we'll look at the felon's health being revealed. So, I think I'm going to use this deck for Stephen Miller. So, will there be an attack on Stephen Miller? We get the strength card popping out. Will there be an attack on Stephen Miller? With this prosecutorial, passionate energy, there's certainly a huge opposition to him. He's definitely not well liked by the public. But will there actually be a physical attack on him? There be a physical attack? I mean, it could just be a spiritual attack too. Um, I don't know how much that would work because I don't think he actually believes in anything. I don't think he has like a conscience or anything like that. So this it feels like a physical attack. Physical, or at least an attempted physical attack. Might not be successful attack on him. Well, things are up in the air. The situation's fluid. It's being juggled. Circles of support and celebration in the environment around. It feels like there are people possibly plotting this attack. And then we get the Two of Wands in the upper right. We'll have to kind of see what that means here in a second. We get the King of Wands in the environment around. A lot of people are very passionate. A lot of people are very worried about what's going on in the country. I think a lot of people think he has more power than he actually does, although he definitely has a lot of influence. Um, we get justice at the center of the reading, things balancing themselves out. This almost feels karmic, as in a way of the universe slapping him back into reality and saying, you know, hate gets returned with, has a way of being stopped. Um, I don't know that it's an actual assault. Someone being handed like money to carry this out, like it's a plot. It's not like, you know, it's going to be very well planned. The problem might be it gets caught before it happens. I don't, and it doesn't feel like an assassination attempt. It feels like more like it's just a plot to go and hit him with like a bat or something along those lines. Um, the people doing it obviously have some mental health concerns. Although at the same time, it's somewhat hard to empathize with something bad happening to Stephen Miller. It's kind of like, well, could happen to a nicer person kind of energy. I think there'll be a lot of Schadenfreude if it does happen. Something around money, and then the magician. So lots of energy being manifested. Also curious, with Stephen Miller's wife working for Elon Musk and the magician there for a while representing Musk when he was still working in the government. Could be something with that as well. I think it's up in the air. I do think Stephen Miller will get some sort of justice coming towards him in a karmic sense. And I do think there are people behind the scenes working to um, send a message to him. I don't think they're well, but they're wanting to send a message. And this is a crossroads kind of situation. I think it's best if it doesn't happen because I think if it were to happen, it would set back the movement that is against the felon, which is moving pretty well. The resistance is doing quite well. But there are circles of support for this. It feels like money might even exchange hands with the Ace of Pentacles and the Queen of Pentacles, in particular sorry, did that backwards. The Queen of Pentacles in this deck where the snake is handing the money. It's like a poison pill, right? It's kind of like, here you go. And then it's not hard to recruit people that would be willing to do this because I think a lot of people just seriously dislike the man because I can't imagine liking him, I guess. Um, it would be done as an attempt to stop the greed. If one plan doesn't work, try another. The hope is to get some fiery new leadership to replace the felon. Of course, this is a misunderstanding of civics because there's just nothing in the Constitution that allows that to happen. So, I mean, the only way he gets taken out of power is by impeachment or death. So, um, okay, so I don't know that they're actually being attacked, but I think there's some being plotted, and I think we might hear about it against Stephen Miller. Okay. So I keep getting that there's going to be this big news story breaking on the felon's health. And I don't know if, I read a lot of news and anymore, you know, it's understandable to me that the New York Times charges to read their articles. That makes sense. The Washington Post charging to read their articles. That makes sense. But now CNN is charging to read their articles, a lot of them. That to me seems like, is CNN in serious trouble? They seem to be the only media outlet that's on TV that's charging to read articles. I mean, CNBC always has, right? But that's different. They pretend they're offering investment advice, right? So anyhow, putting that aside, just a side thought there. Will there be anything revealed about the felon's health soon, like in the next month? Be anything revealed about the felon's health next month? Do you think we're going to see more scenes where it's becoming obvious that he's gotten cognitive issues, but actually something concrete with sources revealed? I think we'll start to see insiders in the White House starting to talk. I think the more chaos around the budget bill, what they call the big beautiful bill, there's nothing beautiful about it, but the more we might see people getting frustrated and revealing these things. So we get the King of Wands. This is, again, a very passionate, prosecutorial type energy, someone who's very well respected in the journalist community. Now My respect for some journalists wavers depending upon my mood, but someone like a Philip Bump or a Maggie Haberman, something along those lines. Yeah, there's some sort of spy inside the White House or inside the government that's just observing and taking notes of all the things that are going wrong with him. And then we get the card for the greedy merchant. Yeah, I think there's a lot of anxiety around the felon and within the administration that these things are going to start to be taken more seriously and pushed forward through the media. Yeah, something comes forward. So, I mean, this is second page. There's spy in the camp with the Page of Swords and the Page of Pentacles, something coming forward about his health. And that's at the center of the reading. So, really couldn't be more clear. People are working behind the scenes to gather the information, it feels like now. I don't think they want to publish a story unless it's well sourced. They want to make sure that they're not exposing themselves to libel or defamation. Uh, Meanwhile, I think they're keeping the felon pretty confined and trying to limit his interactions. And I think the story is going to make a big impact when it comes out. How soon it comes out, I'm not so sure. We'll see if we can't get a timeline there. And then there's circles of support around this. So some journalist or journalists are going to bring forward a message about his health, and it's going to be very well documented. Like there's going to be more than one source. In the meantime, they're keeping the felon's interactions in public kept to a minimum because they know that every interaction is a way of possibly exposing how cognitively declining he is. And for their own greedy purposes, they want to keep that quiet. But there's somebody inside the government that's mad about something. Like, I think they were kind of a loyalist, and then they are mad about something. I don't know if it's the Iran bombing or something going wrong with the budget bill because of something the felon said that spurs this on. There's always been anxiety around his health inside of the administration. But now it's like there's people actually behind the scenes working on something. And whatever they come up with is going to be very strong and it's going to be received in a very damaging light for the felon. And so, yeah, more messages coming forward, circles of support around the journalists and exposing the felon and the abuse of power. The abuse of power being hiding, his health records like nobody else has before. It's very much feels like it's a crossroads for the country, and it's inevitable that the deceit uh, gets exposed, the deception, the dishonesty, it gets exposed around his health. And then the country can move forward, even though it'll be a volatile situation, it'll be a victory for the people, the Six of Wands. So it very much feels like that's what's going to happen. Um, I feel like it happens before he passes. It could happen after, but I don't think so. Um, let's maybe just ask that question. Because health problems be exposed before his passing? Just one or two cards. So we get the magician, that would be yes. And then we get the Two of Wands. So decisions having to be made. And then we get the Page of Swords again. Well, it's the Prince of Swords and the Toth deck. But again, it's like there's that spy in the camp that brings forward the story. It's just a matter of whether they have the guts to publish it. That's the part that worries me slightly. But I think they do. I think it happens before he passes. And I think it'll be undeniable. Like they'll have all their T's crossed, their I's dotted. So, yeah, if you're interested in learning how I read tarot cards from my perspective, I'd like to have you in the Patreon class. It's going to be fairly informal, but there'll be some live interactions as well as lots of time for questions and answers and little exercises that I will share and when I was first learning how to read tarot cards some 30 years ago. So, all right. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with another video soon.